Okay, we are recording and welcome to Video Poise and Performance, Zoom chat number 2. I'm Pam Wood and I am in Maryland, on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And this group really has just kind of been tugging at my heart to help primarily new business owners, small business owners, entrepreneurs, but even new graduates coming right out of school, hot off their diploma, hot off the press, and trying to help them build their online communication skills, especially if they're going into broadcasting, radio or TV. I'm surrounded by some wonderful mentors in this group, even as an early start. And so with that, I'm going to let them do some introductions, and then we're going to start with our topic today. So this time I'll do ladies first. So Lanita, would you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
I will. Hello, I am Lanita Wesson, and I am a former broadcast journalist. I have worked in the industry for 20 plus years, dating myself there, but what can you do? I have done every shift from morning news, midday news, evening news. Started out as a one-man band reporter, which they're now called MMJs. And I recently relocated to Richmond, Virginia from the Eastern Shore, and as a result am not presently working in the television news business. I am, however, doing some things in my wheelhouse, as they say: social media content production, social media content posting. I am also doing some copy editing, some small things under my company, 3D Communications, copywriting, freelance things, and writing in general, working on a couple of projects that include personal things to me. So I'll share more about that as those do come to pass more, but have been in the communications industry for quite some time and am excited to be here and maybe see where this can lead and how we can help.
Gives me goosebumps. I mean, looking right here, and I'm being probably very, I guess, generous. There's at least minimum 60 years experience just between us, right? So I don't want to give all of our ages away, but at least 60 years presented on camera right now. So, okay, and next let's introduce Kent, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself.
That's 60 years, and that's just me. So it feels that way sometimes.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I'm Kent Klein, and Pam and I worked together a long time ago in Salisbury in radio. I had worked for a number of local stations in Maryland and Delaware, in news and in talk show hosting as well. And then went to the Voice of America for 22 years, where I was a radio news anchor and a TV program host and a White House correspondent. And for the past 6 years, I've been at Sirius XM radio at the POTUS channel, channel 124, as a substitute program host and also an occasional White House correspondent. So I've been doing all of that. So combined, it's about, I guess we're up to about 36 years in broadcasting now.
Yikes.
I know, I can't believe I've been anywhere. Yes, it's been interesting. And, we were, I don't mean to take away from your intro, Pam, but the last meeting we had a couple of weeks ago, Pam was talking about how she watches some of the folks on local news in Salisbury, and they're folks who are about like we were when we were starting out there. And one of the biggest challenges when you get into it is the strict limitations of time broadcasting. And one of the other people who responded was talking about, as a librarian, talking about book talks as well.
Yes, I was hoping she would jump on here today. June, I hope you'll be able to tune in here a little bit. Let's see if there's...
Right, the 25-word book summaries, which is pretty impressive. I hope to hear from her about how she was able to do that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's a real challenge, and some people may be tempted to work on that by talking faster, trying to talking like an auctioneer, trying to get it all in.
That's it.
I think the secret is fewer words. If you have fewer words, you don't have to work as hard to get them all in.
Can I get an amen?
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that today.
Yes, indeed. Well, Did I mention SU already since we've gone live? My memory's gone just that quick. Did I mention SU
I
when
don't think so.
Okay, so before we go any further, my brain's already gone off the left field, but we do want to welcome Salisbury University and a Salisbury University alumni office for asking us to contribute this program so that they can also maybe share this as an educational tool to whomever, alumni that are starting new businesses, new graduates. So we're happy and I'm delighted to partner with them today. And hopefully we'll get all of them on board. One of the young ladies, Michelle Pryor, who is active in their giving campaigns, I believe, is in the group. So I'm hoping she'll be able to tune in. But we're happy to provide this for the local university. So my background primarily was, broadcasting from radio. I wasn't really on camera. I know I've got the ring lights in my glasses. I'm sorry. And so I too did the different shifts. I was in college when I started and I did a little copywriting, the advertisements, mostly the commercials, the old, really just kind of writing them out by hand and typing them up and giving them to the production people and sending them on their way to do the voiceovers. And then the other staff would add the ads on. They'd actually come into the DJ booth and add the advertisements in by hand and say, you got to get this in by a certain time. And so, but I did weekends. I did every weekend for I don't know how many years, through college. And then when I graduated, they did bring me on full time. And I worked, as many of us probably have, sort of odd weeks. Like I might be off Monday and Tuesday, but then I'd work the rest of the week. Or I might be off Thursday and Friday and pick up the weekends and early part of the week. And then I went to midnights. And I got to say, that was a tough role. Even for a young whippersnapper, that's a tough 6 nights a week. 5 is bad enough, but 6 nights a week is a really hard on your system, I think, to do that. Mm-hmm. But let's go ahead and talk about the topic today, which is, I think we can all agree, less is more. And so not only just in copywriting, and that will give us the opportunity to hopefully to slow down a little bit in our presentations, because that's really a pet peeve of mine. I know when I hear it on air, they're, like Ken says, they're trying to cram so much in a little bit of time, but also learning how to verbalize in front of a camera. Excuse me. So I'm going to turn it over to Kent to kick us off. I'll share a couple of tips, and Lanita will get you, and maybe have you come back as a follow-up, maybe have you as a guest on in June, maybe later in June. That would be awesome. So Kent, I'm going to let you take it away for the time we have today.
Oh, okay. I don't think I have a lot that will be a huge surprise to anyone here. This is probably information that you know already. And if you do, then I think it's always good to remind ourselves of this because it's very important. But being concise is a tremendous advantage. And we were talking about some of the cases when you really have to distill it down. I worked at the station where I worked after Salisbury in Baltimore. My newscasts every hour were 50 seconds long.
Oh, wow.
4 stories, sports and weather, plus a hello and a goodbye. So I had to just chop out every unnecessary word and even a few necessary ones to get that point across. Sports tonight, Orioles at Milwaukee. Weather clear tonight, low 56 tonight. So and there are ways to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think just one thing you always have to think about. Oh, by the way, Pam, one person who really taught me about this was our former colleague in Salisbury, Bill Satterfield. He told me, he would go through my copy with the pen and just be savage about it. And that's what you have to do. And Lanita, I'm sure you've been through the same thing with an editor or having to be your own editor and doing that. And we all have. Rule number 1, I think, is delete extraneous words and phrases. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, words that we don't even think about, we think are helping us communicate and really aren't, because they're just dead weight. I'm looking at things like now, currently, at this time, mm-hmm. And the sentence will be something like, city council is meeting at this time to discuss at this time. If you have is, you don't need at this time. It's completely extraneous, or just extraneous. It doesn't have to be completely extraneous.
Touche.
Yeah, it's one of my least favorite phrases, like armed gunmen, or VOA. We always had stories about armed militias. But yeah,
Or
those are always the
completely
most
destroyed.
effective kind.
What was that, Lenita?
Completely destroyed.
Yes, yes. Hate that.
Boy, these are great tips. I hope people are making notes of these. Let me tell
Yeah,
you, this is great for small business owners who are now probably having to write their copy. So have at it. Keep going.
yeah, absolutely. In order is another phrase that we use and don't think about. The city council met today in order to discuss a tax cut. How about just to discuss a tax cut? You don't need the in order. One that we used to use at Voice of America all the time. They have some very gifted writers there who can take mounds of source material, pick out what's correct and what isn't, and rewrite it for an international audience for whom English may not be their first language. And a lot of them are really good at writing this broadcast copy, but some of them write like they're writing State Department position papers. And you would get phrases like, for his part. And I was talking about another fellow VOA retiree the other day. He and I were discussing that phrase. Like, what exactly does that communicate? How does that advance your thought? How does that advance the sentence? I think when you're writing, if you have the time to do so, or if not, make the time, look at it and say, do I need that word? Do I need that phrase? Or is there a four-word phrase that could be distilled to one word or two words? One of the toughest things in local news is dealing with police stories, because police have a very specific way of writing their releases in their police jargon. Things like gray in color. The car was gray in color. Well, no, it was just gray. Suspicious in nature. The fire was suspicious in nature. Yeah, it's a suspicious fire. The subject fled on foot in the direction of, police were looking for a man who ran away from who was alleged to have held up a store and then ran away. It's just, they write like you talk. And by the way, don't let me forget, I have a couple of Twitter feeds and one book I'd like to recommend.
Oh, yes, by all means.
Subject, which I think will be helpful. So not only shorter sentences, but shorter words. You can distill, instead of using a larger word like exited, you can use left. And even cutting down a syllable or two.
A syllable, yes, exactly.
Is helpful, especially when you're up against a really draconian time limit. I was also thinking about our every day we watch the local news here in DC. It's on from 4 to 7 p.m. We don't watch the whole thing, but the poor sports guy gets 1 minute from 6:58 to 6:59, and he's got to fit it all in. Unfortunately, these days there's not much to fit in. It's not a challenge.
And yet we'll get 20 minutes of weather now.
Yeah, that's right.
At least locally, we're getting
and 10 minutes
of weather
banter, which is we had a woman doing sports on that station who would get her like 2 minutes of sports, and then the weather guy would joke with her through the whole thing, and you could see her getting annoyed. It's like, excuse me, I've got to put across here. So it's I can see how folks are up against it. It's difficult, but even if you can use shorter words, shorter sentences, that's a very good way to do it. And one last little bit of information. I would say piece of advice I have that's helped me is, when you write your story, read it out loud, and maybe not too loud, but you just kind of read it out loud so you can hear what it sounds like. Even if it's something you're writing for the eye, reading it out loud will help you, I think, to get a better idea of what it sounds like, and oh, gee, do I really need that phrase or that word? I can chop that out. We Well, I have kind of an R-rated story about Klein and Salisbury when we didn't do that, and there was one phrase in a story that I read on the air that I really should not have read on the air.
Oh.
I probably shouldn't go into that here. But,
You can tell us behind the scenes.
okay, all right. Well, it has to do with an annual tradition in Ocean City called the Lifeguards Ball. So that's
Leave
all
it
I'm
at
saying.
that.
But these are kind of the ideas. These are the ideas I have about how to make things
They're
short.
excellent, excellent. I like a particular one that stands out to me is trying to get from 2 or 3 syllables down to one. Finding a word that would just represent it as well. What
Sure.
about you said remind you about the Twitter feeds and the book?
Absolutely, thank you. A former colleague of mine who I worked with in Wilmington, Delaware, he's now an anchor, a radio anchor, morning anchor in Rochester at WHAM. His name is Todd Halliday, Hallidy, and he has a Twitter feed called Todd's Broadcast Style. And he talks about this sort of thing all the time, not only how to make it shorter, but how to make it better and how to make it clearer and more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And the Twitter handle is at S Broadcast Style. That's at
Mm-hmm.
S, the letter S, Broadcast Style. And that's called Todd's Broadcast Style. Another guy is named Jeff Butera, Butera. His Twitter feed is called Write Like You Talk. And it's at Write, W-R-I-T-E, like you, the letter U, talk. And he's very good at exploding the police jargon or the legal jargon or the scientific or medical jargon, and making sure that you're writing clearly and very understandably for your audience, keeping in mind that your audience may not be completely focused on what you're doing.
Sure. Especially, like I say, if they're new to this, they've had to pivot their business or whatever it is, and now they're at home forced to be writing their own ads or their own copy or their own press releases. These are excellent tips, I think, for people to, and perhaps, I don't know, if you have a spouse at home and maybe the spouse could read it back to you so that,
Yes.
you're going to hear how it sounds without seeing it. Somebody once told me they actually wrote for proofreading, they actually take like a brochure or something and read it backwards, and it helps them pick up any typos.
Well, that's interesting.
I have never done it that way or heard of that, but she relies on that for like fundraisers and things. That's how she'll go back and reread it backwards.
Interesting. That's cool.
And Ken, I'll ask you in the group if you would. I'll get this up in the group. I failed to do the last one. I thought I had posted the conversation, but I hadn't. But would you go in and post underneath this feed after I get the lesson up or the video up and repost those Twitter feeds and book?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, let me throw in the book as well.
Yes.
There's a man named Merv Block, who used to write for Walter Cronkite, and he does writing seminars. And he has a book titled Writing Broadcast News Shorter, Sharper, Stronger. And he is merciless about editing down copy and making it very clear and, as he says, shorter, sharper, and stronger. I was I think I was in Salisbury at the time. I went to an AP convention in Ocean City.
Yeah.
And Mr.
You
Block.
probably were there, Anita. I would imagine awards or something.
Yeah. Several, yes.
You were probably there. I may have met you. He was the speaker about broadcast writing, and the night before, a guy who was about my age at the time, in his 20s, was on the elevator with Mr. Block in the hotel, and he turned to me and said, "Mr. Block, I'm so glad you'll be speaking tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say." And Merv Block turned to him and said, "No, you're eager to hear what I have to say." And that was the end of the conversation. That kept that conversation short.
Yes, indeed.
But as I say, he's merciless about making sure that your writing is short and concise and clear. So so those are just some recommendations and
Excellent.
ideas I have.
Thank you. And I would absolutely love to defer to Lanita, but if we can even make yours, because I'd like to for you to delve in as a guest down the road. So what would you like to share on top of that, and but yet keep some special nuggets for us for a little bit later?
I'll just say the one thing I find in whatever writing you're doing, even if it's copy for your business, is not to bury the lead, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
You have to come out of the gate with what it is you're providing, what it is you do. We get so caught up in the color commentary, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, that we, by the time you grabbed me, I've been reading for 15 minutes, it feels like. And
Yeah.
that's if you stay. A lot of people won't stay,
Right.
especially now in this electronic age. So be
Yes.
very clear and specific about what it is that you want to tell the reader and
Mm-hmm.
start there. And then maybe work your way back with some of the color and the fluff, if you will.
Well,
I
that is
think.
so important in the
Oh
digital
yes.
age, and on social media.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, yeah, you've got to grab
We
them in the
want
first
it quick.
words.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yet, I think you see when you sign up for something, like maybe online, you've seen, get my blah, blah, blah PDF document or whatever. The landing pages are super long. And because I'm kind of going through that now with something with dance that I'm trying to bring out. And as much as I want to keep it short, I know that they have to tell a story to a certain degree. You have to kind of take them on that little journey to get at the end of what you want them to get. So that's sort of a almost an opposite type of thing. I can see it both ways. I've clicked on things like, why is this so long? But they're creating this story. They're telling a story, trying to hit all the emotions that you might be experiencing to buy that product, whatever it might be. So that's kind of an interesting take on it too. Well, I definitely would love to have you back, Lanita. So I'll be
Okay.
in touch with you. I'm trying to right now just, we may get off schedule. I'm trying to keep it to maybe Tuesday afternoons, maybe during the business day instead of evening. But we have some international friends actually now. We've got somebody from Australia and we've got somebody from Vienna. We've got some West Coast people.
Nice.
But I know the couple of things that I wanted to mention, a couple of radio related things, and then some actually dance training that has actually helped me and changed the way I present when I'm teaching a dance class. But and Ken, I don't know if this was when we were in the same building, but WBOC started out AM FM television locally. And at a certain point was the early 80s, and they were getting ready to switch formats on their FM side. And so the FM radio had been beautiful music for years and had a huge following. And then all of a sudden, one night at midnight, the format changed and it went to what is now Q105. And I was on the shift at midnight when that switch flipped. And I was the first one to start the music for Q105. And the next day they got like 300 calls, where's our beautiful music? But what is leading me up to the story is the salesman I can still see this, the salesman came from Texas to talk to all the announcers, probably Ed, our program manager, kind of get us ready and pumped up for this new format. He was a salesman, but I think he was a disc jockey before. And the one thing that stuck with me, and I still hear him saying this, is to all the announcers, is avoid digging a hole when you're on the air. Avoid digging the hole and by that he means don't keep talking if you don't really have a lot to say that's going to be connected to what you're doing. And he said, because you're going to have to work twice as hard to get out of that hole. And so after that, every time I went on the air, I grabbed about 5 or 6 sheets of typing paper. I wrote down everything I was going to say. I wrote down, so let's say maybe there was 3 to 4 songs in between segments. I'd write down the name and title of every song because I knew I couldn't remember all of them, even at that young age. And I might do whatever little snippet I might contribute about the song or maybe a song tidbit or something. I'd write it down because, and I kept it. And of course, I wasn't on television, so it didn't matter if I looked down really. But, I kind of read, but still kept the personality in it. And I did that all through the rest of my radio days. And so hope that it helped keep it more concise and keep it going, because you had to have a way to get out of it. You had to eventually go hit a commercial and play a commercial. But if you kept talking and talking and talking, you're wasting time. You're not going to get the commercials in, things that we've talked about. So that had stayed with me quite a bit. And then when I started my dance training, I was already teaching the ballroom, but I went for training to work with Parkinson's patients. This is like 2012. It was just a little weekend training with one of the best. He created it, a Dance for Parkinson's. And when we got back and I taught the class at the local senior center, it was a matter of not, I had to break down the tempo or cut the tempo in half and sometimes in half again. I had to physically slow it down because of all the Parkinson's conditions that everybody had. Everybody was different. Some were standing, some were seated, some were in a wheelchair. And then I also had to learn to make sure that what I was saying was very clear to them. So I had to kind of slow my speech down and slow my body down. But what really has impacted, I think, my presentation in the dance classroom setting is the certification I took. It took me almost 4 years. It's supposed to take 2, but it took a little longer just for, caregiver reasons. But it was exactly what we're talking about. In the manual, you had ways that you were supposed to say something. So in other words, if I gave you a quick example, would be maybe how I used to say, okay, now we're going to turn in this direction, and we're going to look and face this wall. All right, so I've left out the direction. I've left out how much of the turn. Now I'll say, we're going to make 1/4 turn left. And do I do it every time? No, but it's in my head now to make 1/4 turn right, 1/4 turn left, 3/8 of a turn. Those are the kinds of things that have, really stayed with me in that training, and that has been really, really so helpful. So that's the couple of points. Those are the couple of points that I wanted to share with the audience today. So let me just check. I don't think anybody else has checked in, but we will certainly keep this up in the group. Any other final thoughts before? Let me see if I had any other notes that I wanted. Where'd my little notes go to? Again, we're working with Salisbury University and Salisbury University Alumni Association, and we're pleased to bring them this recording that I'll be sending to them in hopes that we can help some alumni who are pivoting and going into small business for the first time. And to the graduates, congratulations. We know you worked hard, and we're very sorry that the celebrations aren't what you were expecting, but hopefully your families have made that special for you. So, but I have lost my little notes, so I think they blew off the table here. I was actually going to talk about bullet points, but I'm going to save that for another time. I think that can be a whole other topic. But I do want to announce in 2 weeks, I'll do an event in the group, and we're going to be talking with a young man who is a very talented videographer, and he's going to be sharing some tips on camera angles, lights, how to make a better quality video, perhaps for people from home using their phones, and keeping on a budget. And he's going to be joining us in 2 weeks. I love him. He's just such a kind young man and really smart with helping all of us. So it'll be an intergenerational chat for sure. So any last words, folks, at all?
Just one more thing, Pam. I've been doing a little work with public relations as well,
Mm-hmm.
and the folks in PR have been. I see the point made over and over and over again when writing press releases. Get to the point immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Put your lead up front as to
Yeah, that's what Lanita. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why you want why you think this is a news story, how this is going to help the news director or editor reach his or her audience, and keep it short, just a few paragraphs, maybe 3 paragraphs. Don't go into the whole history of the company. Don't do a 2-page thing. Short, sweet, and powerful.
When I worked in another sort of a PR job many years ago, one of the things that the director did in his press releases, which has still kind of stayed with me now too, is, we always put the name of the agency first, coming out of it. So let's say, the ABC talent agency is blank, blank, blank. I mean, he really wanted the name of his division and his department first. How do you feel about that?
If it doesn't interfere
both of you.
with getting the message out there quickly, fine. I think you have to think of it from the journalist's point of view. You're trying to get a newspaper, a website, a broadcast outlet to run this, and they're trying to connect with their audience. And you need to make it very clear immediately why excuse me, why this is going to be a big hit with their audience. And if you can do that and get the sponsor's name in there, fine. But if that interferes in any way, I'd cut back on that if I could.
So Lanita, if you had a lot of, I'm sure, community press releases come to you here when you were local, what caught your eye when they came in via email or fax? Or let's say I was doing a fundraiser for nonprofit ABC. What would have struck out with you, or not struck out? What would have caught your attention, and what would strike it out, I guess I should say?
Well, I will definitely piggyback on what Kent was saying in terms of put the lead sentence, or whether you're calling it the headline, like that doesn't even need to be a complete sentence. You really just want to get those words in there that say what this is, why this is, that grabs me as the reporter that has to pitch the story, or even in PR, you have to pitch the story to someone to say, hey, this is what my client wants to do. How does this look? How do we want to format that? And so I would agree that you do want to get that first kind of, like I said, don't bury the lead. But as you were talking about the name of the company being in there, I feel like that's kind of, I was always taught, don't necessarily immerse myself into the story. It's not about me necessarily.
Good point.
So I agree. If you can get it in there without it seeming like this shameless self-serving plug unnecessarily, sometimes it brings light to the story, especially if it's a catchy name, or if it's a name that's going to grab their attention, and they're going to remember it. But as you were saying, the ABC talent agency is, tell me what they're doing first, and then maybe let's go from there. So
yeah,
that would be my thought.
In that case, it was just his preference as we sent things out that he wanted his division and company name, because it wasn't a private company, it was a countywide. So, well, listen, I am so grateful. Gosh, this was great for me too, to just kind of refresh and get rejuvenated with writing. And I do a lot, social media tidbits. I don't do a lot of in-depth writing these days and papers and all stories and things like that. But I'm grateful for your tips and for being really what I consider mentors here in this group. So, feel free to chime in anytime. If people are asking questions in the group and you've got some experience on it, don't be shy and help us help these other folks. So
absolutely.
Thank you. And I will hopefully see you guys in about 2 weeks then. And we'll
Sounds good.
time to time, okay? And if you see anything interesting, feel free to just pop it in there, okay?
All right.
Thanks, Pam.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye, Lanita. Bye, Ken.
Goodbye, Pam.